Project Black t-shirt time. Hey guys, it's Adam Caesar, and this is episode 5 of the Project Black t-shirt YouTube show. Today we're going to be talking about a movie that I've been waiting for a really long time. A movie that it seems like everyone and their brother, if they go to film festivals, got to see before I did. Not that I'm bitter or anything. But it's Ben Wheatley's High Rise, the adaptation of J.G. Ballard's book of the same name. I'm not the biggest Ballard reader or scholar. I've only actually read one novel of his and seen film adaptations of a bunch of others. I've read High Rise, and I read it 5 or 6 years ago now. It was at ReaderCon, and someone on a panel had brought it up. And it's not like I read every book that someone references, but it sounded really interesting, and I really loved the book. And then flash forward to a few years later, where after Down Terrace, Kill List, Sightseers, and A Field in England, I'm a huge fan of this director, Ben Wheatley. So when it was announced that he was adapting this novel, it seemed like a really great kind of mix of subject and creative, because Ben Wheatley's bringing along Amy Jump. 4 out of the 5 of his pictures have been written or co-written by her, I believe. And Laurie Rose, who's his director-photographer on all of his films. So this is like, I'm not only just like a fan of Ben Wheatley, but I'm a fan of this kind of constant collaboration he has going on. And as for High Rise, I have to say I'm a little bit, not at a loss for words, because I'm going to talk about it for 10 minutes, but I was not expecting the movie that I got. I was not expecting a movie that's actually very faithful to the novel, and that for me is both a pro and a con, because it feels like somewhat less of a Ben Wheatley film, even though all of his past movies have kind of jumped around in tone, content. They all have this unifying feel behind them, this unifying, especially, and we'll talk about this later, but they have this unifying Britishness. They're very British movies and deal with British culture in different ways, and High Rise does, but it felt like he was kind of playing in someone else's sandbox, beholden to someone else's themes and ideas, and while it's a pretty pitch perfect execution of the ideas that appear in High Rise, I kind of wish I could go back in time and have not known so much about the movie and not known so much about where it was going before seeing it, because it is a beautiful movie. It is incredibly well acted and well cast. I guess we should talk about that cast. It's Tom Hiddleston, Sienna Miller, Jeremy Irons, and we'll talk about him in a second, Elizabeth Moss from Mad Men, and a bunch of other kind of great actors and great character actors that you recognize from Wheatley's other films. They all kind of pop in, some of them even for just quick cameos. Before we get too far into talking about the film itself, we should probably give a quick plot synopsis. So High Rise, based on the 1975 novel by J.G. Ballard. The novel is kind of sci-fi, kind of horror, and kind of this allegory. And Lang is this doctor who's just moved into a kind of luxury apartment building, a luxury high-rise, where it has a grocery store, a swimming pool, a gym, all the kind of amenities one would need. There's a line where someone says that nobody thinks about or considers anyone in the high-rise who's 2 floors above or below them. So there's kind of this set social strata, even though the architect Royal set this up to kind of be a utopia where there wouldn't be so much of a class system, but there already is, because people talk to you and they want to know what floor you're on. Lang's on 25, so he's an interesting protagonist because he's kind of right in the middle. He's a doctor, he's a professional, but he is a little bit of an outcast, and a little bit doesn't mesh with the kind of the old money that lives on the upper floors. So living in this high rise, there is no exact moment where things start to go wrong, but the residents of the high-rise do kind of form into clans and cliques and become more and more barbaric even though they don't devolve into anything like zombies or anything like that. They're still kind of proper British people, but doing horrible things, and living in a very nonsensical fashion, which in the book reads as allegorical, and when made very literal, in the film actually works a little bit better, I think, because it's such a concrete adaptation, and we see the building is sketched out a little better. There's a little bit more of a logic to it. So another thing that struck me right kind of within the first 15 minutes of High Rise, I was expecting, and I had mentioned this before, I was expecting a kind of Ben Wheatley joint, and what I got was something that felt all very aware of another filmmaker, David Cronenberg, who also did his own J.G. Ballard adaptation, Crash, who also has worked with Jeremy Irons, who's one of the stars of High Rise, who's also made a movie, especially early career, in 1975, the same year that Ballard's novel came out. He made a movie called Shivers, about people going crazy in a high rise. It doesn't feel maybe like so much 100% deliberate homage, but it can't help but feel like a Cronenberg movie at points. Cronenberg's one of those directors that a lot of fans, especially a lot of horror fans, like to name check and like to call things Cronenbergian. But this is a very specific kind of period of Cronenberg, and I think it's just part of that mix-up of we're adapting Ballard, Cronenberg likes Ballard, all these influences coming together with a lot of Ben Wheatley's themes and concerns kind of hard-cooked into this adaptation in the script. So things I loved. Love the cast, love the cinematography. Laurie Rose does an incredible job. This is very clearly the highest budgeted Ben Wheatley film so far. I don't know the numbers on that. It just has to be between this cast and this. These sets are gorgeous, and everything seems like it had to be built from scratch, because you aren't going to find this place, this early to mid 70s brutalist architecture that doesn't even seem physically possible at times. And it may sound like I have reservations about this movie, but it is 100% something you should rent, or if going to be playing in a theater, you should 100% go and see it. It's a really, really interesting film, a really well-made film, something that I feel like I need to watch again because it is very dense. It is a movie with a 2-hour running time, but it does have all these kind of quasi-soap opera subplots going on, a ton of characters, and I did feel like even in one go through, I hadn't really caught all the connections I needed to. So it is something I'm definitely going to rewatch and revisit, even if it doesn't hit the immediate fanboy centers of my brain where I love Kill List. I think it's absolutely one of my favorite movies. I love Sightseers. I think it's hilarious. This is a movie that I am acknowledging is great and is going to take me probably a couple views to even form a real opinion of, just because there's so much going on there, and because it's so different than what I thought it was going to be. I wasn't kind of strapped in for such a, first of all, straight adaptation of the book. Second of all the Cronenberg influence, and third of all the it ends on a very interesting note that maybe was a little bit of an off note for me, because the story itself it doesn't really beat around the bush about what it's talking about. It's talking about class struggle. It's talking about the modern society bringing us closer, ironically closer together, but still keeping us apart. There's a line that gets used a lot about slotting into where you belong in society, and Lang's looking to slot into the high rise. And then at the very end of the picture, and this is not something that happens in the book, there's a radio broadcast, or we're hearing the words of Margaret Thatcher talking about capitalism and privatization, and it takes a very kind of more modern, or at least to me, I don't know 100% a ton about British politics, but when I think of Margaret Thatcher, I think of the 80s, and maybe she's coming up, and if this is a pseudo 70s set film, maybe it's anticipating the rise of Thatcher and conservative politics, but it does feel a little bit tacked on. And there's another movie that I absolutely love that does a similar thing. Killing Them Softly. At the end of that film, which is a movie I love a lot, there's Brad Pitt's in a bar and he's watching a speech given by President Obama, and it does kind of it makes the story more current, and it puts like a kind of a pin, or gilds the lily maybe a little bit on some of the themes, but it takes you out of the idea that maybe this is a timeless story, maybe this is a 70s set story, and by making it so current. And I think that by maybe adding another note on top of the already pretty obvious political allegory, maybe Wheatley's doing himself a disservice. But again, it's my first time through, and I still really love the movie, so I'm going to watch it again kind of with an open mind. So that's that. That's the movie, Ben Wheatley's High Rise, the adaptation of the J.G. Ballard novel. Check it out. Really good. Definitely watch it. This week's book recommendation may seem like kind of a no-brainer. It may seem like I'm going to tell you to go read High Rise by J.G. Ballard. I'm not, because I'm not sure that the film is kind of enhanced by either having a foreknowledge or reading it afterwards, because they are kind of so close. Like, maybe it's interesting for people who really, really love the movie or who really, really love the book to kind of fill in those gaps and see where he makes changes, which, again, I read it 5 or 6 years ago, so I'm imagining there are a bunch of changes I'm not remembering, but the broad strokes of the novel are there. So for the first time, I'm going to recommend a book that I actually haven't read yet. This has been on my shelf for a really long time, because it's like kind of an expensive hardcover that I got remaindered at a half-price bookstore. The Drowned World by J.G. Ballard. I do want to read more Ballard because I feel like he's kind of a blind spot, and this is a much earlier book than High Rise. This is 1961, and it is about a world in which the polar ice caps have melted, and all of the cities are kind of turned into lagoons. I've started reading it. I haven't read it all the way through. It begins with a character, a doctor, a biologist, standing in the penthouse of the Ritz Hotel, overlooking a totally washed out city. Clearly a great writer, clearly a well-respected writer. This seems like a little bit more straight science fiction than High Rise, than his later work, but I'm looking forward to it. If you like this video, please hit the like button, subscribe, check out my other videos. I put together a playlist, so if you really wanted to watch me talk for an hour plus, you can watch all 5 episodes if you wanted to. Next week, we're going to mix it up a little bit, and I'm going to be giving a book review and then a movie recommendation based on that, so check that out. And find me on Facebook, find me on Twitter, like everything, sign up for the newsletter, buy my books. That would be great. If you like this show, you want to support me, read my work. I'd really, really appreciate it.